The regular meeting of the planning board of the Township of Bloomfield, Tuesday, July 13, 2021, is now in session. Notice of the time, date, location, and agenda of this meeting, to the extent then known, was provided at least 48 hours prior to the commencement of this meeting, the following manner pursuant to the provisions of Chapter 231 of the law of 1975, the Open Public Meetings Act. One, by posting such notice on the bulletin board of the municipal building, and two, by mailing such notices to the offices of the Independent Press, Bloomfield Life, and Star Ledger. Let's have a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic
for which it stands,
one
nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Your call, please take the roll.
Okay? Okay, Mr. LaForte,
Here.
Mr. Zitka,
Here.
Mr. Harvey,
Here.
Mr. Babula,
Here.
Councilwoman Mundell,
Here.
Mr. Lassick,
Here.
Councilman Rockwell,
Here.
Mr. Stern,
Here.
Ms. Richardson,
Here.
Chairman LaQuaglia.
Here.
For the record, Dr. Hill is absent, and also present is the board's attorney, consulting attorney Michael Rubin, the board's consulting engineer Anthony Marucci.
Thank you, Nicole.
You're welcome.
Okay, first order of business. First, we have no resolutions or no edits to
Wait
read.
a minute, wait. We do have the one resolution Mike sent. I can read it off.
Okay, please, Nick.
You got it. Resolution in the matter of the application of 106-108 Montgomery Street LLC as applicant and owner, and Rosangela Iacovo as owner for preliminary and final site plan approval, variances pursuant to NJSA 40:55D-70C for lot area, building coverage, driveway width, and proximity to a lot line, and facade materials, and a de minimis exception from the residential site improvement standards for number of parking spaces to permit the construction of a 4-story, 34-unit apartment building at property located at 104-108 Montgomery Street, Block 481, lots 16 and 17. Everybody did receive this in advance.
Okay, and can I have a motion to approve or deny the resolution?
Okay, this could be either Mr. Babula, Mr. Harvey, Mr. LaForte, Ms. Richardson, Councilman Rockwell, Mr. Zitka, or Chairman LaQuaglia.
Can I have a motion to approve or deny the resolution?
Mr. Zitka moves it.
Second?
I'll second it.
Mr. LaForte,
Nick, all of you?
you got it. Mr. Babula,
Yes.
Mr. Harvey,
Yes.
Mr. LaForte,
Yes.
Ms. Richardson,
Yes.
Councilman Rockwell,
Yes.
Mr. Zitka,
Yes.
Chairman LaQuaglia.
Yes, so moved. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, and no minutes, correct, Nick?
No minutes, not yet.
Yep, okay. All right, next order of business. Discussion and presentation of a proposed ordinance amending Chapter 315 permitting Class 5 cannabis retail establishments as conditional uses in the CBD Central Business District and the B2 Neighborhood Business District. And we have, everyone got a copy of the resolution from the mayor and council, and I believe Mr. Parlavecchia is here.
Mr. Par-
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Excuse me, someone. He's going to present it to the board, if you would, sir.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, members of the board. Thank you for adding this item to the agenda tonight on a referral resolution from the mayor and council. I just wanted to briefly go through some of the timeline here and give you some background on this ordinance that's been passed by mayor and council. And if you could just indulge me to go through a little bit of the timeline, which I think will be helpful not only to the board in reviewing this, but also to members of the public who may be tuning in. So on June 28th, Mayor and Council introduced and passed on first reading an ordinance amending Chapter 315, permit Class 5 cannabis retail establishments as conditional uses in the Central Business District and the B2 Neighborhood Business District. At the same meeting, the council adopted a resolution referring the proposed ordinance to this board for its review pursuant to the MLUL. Mayor and council have introduce this ordinance now because of the specific timelines established by the recently enacted state legislation, which legalizes the recreational use of marijuana by adults 21 and over, and establishes a regulatory and licensing scheme for commercial recreational operations, use, and possession. As you all know, in 2020, New Jersey voters, and parenthetically approximately 71% of Bluefield voters, approved an amendment to the state constitution to allow for the legalization of a controlled form of marijuana called cannabis. Then in February of 2021, Governor Murphy signed into law the New Jersey Cannabis Regulatory Enforcement Assistance and Marketplace Modernization Act. And that's what legalizes the recreational use of marijuana by adults 21 and over. The New Jersey Cannabis Act establishes 6 marketplace classes of licensed businesses. The municipality can choose to prohibit or limit all, some, or none of the classes from establishing operations in its community. However, a municipality cannot prohibit the delivery of cannabis items by a delivery service within their jurisdiction. And I just want to go through real quickly what these classes of operators are. That's an option for all municipalities right now in the state. Class 1 cannabis cultivator licenses are for growing and cultivating cannabis. Class 2 manufacturer licenses for facilities involved in the manufacturing, preparation, and packaging of cannabis items. Class 3 wholesaler license for facilities involved in obtaining and selling cannabis items for later resale by other licensees. There are Class 4 distributor licenses for businesses involved in transporting cannabis plants in bulk from one licensed cultivator to another licensed cultivator, or items involved from any type of licensed business to another. Class 5 retailer license, and that's the one relevant to our discussion tonight. Those are for locations at which cannabis items and related supplies are sold to consumers. That's the only consumer sale. And Class 6 cannabis delivery licenses are for businesses providing courier services for consumer purchases. And those are fulfilled at licensed cannabis retailers in order to make deliveries of the purchases to a consumer, and which service would include the ability of a consumer to make a purchase directly through the delivery service and present it for fulfillment by a retailer and then delivered. And it's important to note that the law does not allow a municipality to prohibit the delivery of cannabis items and supplies by a delivery service within their jurisdiction. So in other words, if Bloomfield did not want to license these Class 6 delivery services, our police could not stop a Montclair licensed delivery service from coming in and delivering to somebody within the field. The significance of all this is that if no action is taken in terms of opting in or opting out, Class 1 through 4 and the Class 6 businesses would be automatically permitted uses in all industrial zones. And the Class 5 retail selling would be conditional uses in all commercial zones for retail. The Mayor and Council have determined the Class 5 retailer license would be the most likely businesses attracted to Bloomfield. So now location and number are important considerations. The ordinance being presented to you for review as introduced would conditionally permit a maximum of 6 retail cannabis establishments in the central business district and B2 neighborhood business districts, but evenly distributed throughout the municipality. And it roughly works out as 2 per ward. And that's how it's geographically broken down. And I was remiss to not say this earlier, but your council, Mr. Rubin, has really been a fantastic resource for me and for Bonnie Flynn and all of us who've been working on this for the last couple of months, believe it or not. His knowledge of the town and certainly from the ordinance was a tremendous help to me. But other than the retailer license, so far this ordinance does not permit any other classes of licenses at this time. And these are some important pieces with that ordinance. All retailers would be subject to site plan review prior to the commencement of offering products for sale. There are parking requirements imposed on each retailer. There is prohibition on drive-through services. Cannabis consumption areas are prohibited both indoors and outdoors. No cannabis-related products shall be visible from the exterior of the building. Currently, retailers are restricted from locating within 1,000 feet of the historic district or historic site in Bloomfield. Council is considering imposing a buffer from any daycare center, elementary or secondary school, undergraduate, graduate school, or trade school. That's not in the current iteration, but again, the council has only passed this on first reading. Also, the law prohibits cannabis businesses from co-locating in grocery stores, delis, indoor food markets, other stores engaging in retail food, and premises licensed for retail sales of alcoholic beverages. So why are we here today? Municipalities that wish to prohibit or regulate one or more classes of cannabis establishments must act by ordinance within 180 days of the statute's enactment, which means we have to act on or before August 21st, 2021. So Mayor and Council we have looked at all the meeting schedules and we sort of backed into this so that we could get this ordinance adopted in time to comply with the state regulations. This would be, again, to prohibit or regulate the number of establishments, the locations, manner and times of operation. Also permits us to enact a local cannabis tax, which is imposed by this ordinance, and I can tell you that the local cannabis tax being proposed would be 2% on the receipts of each sale, and it's paid directly to the municipality. So you can look at it almost like a property tax, in that it comes directly to the town, and delinquencies are treated the same as delinquent property taxes. If a municipality does not act by August 21st, again, any class of cannabis establishments or distributor will be permitted to operate in this municipality. And once that date passes, then we're locked into those circumstances for 5 years. Once a municipality permits such establishments, though, that action, while remaining valid, does allow us to opt things in at a later time. So the reason I mention that is there's also a Cannabis Regulatory Commission that's been established by the statute who has to establish certain rules and regulations for all these operations. And unfortunately, the due date for those regulations are the same as the due date for all these ordinances throughout the state. However, based on the Mayor and Council's input, and certainly the input of the voters, we thought it prudent to at least get started and try to handle this from a retail perspective, which at least we think we can get an easier handle on. So that's the ordinance at this time. I can speak to some of the other ones, such as the more industrial manufacturing type uses, like cultivation and manufacturing. Council didn't permit those licenses. And as you know, the master plan didn't really encourage expansion of the more historical industrial manufacturing uses. So at this time, that's not included in this ordinance. There certainly is a lot of creativity out there with micro businesses and micro cultivation. But again, I think the Mayor and Council were hesitant to put too much into this ordinance at once, especially since the rules and regulations are not yet established. That's a somewhat long-winded, but believe me, brief overview of this very long statute. And Chairman, I can answer some questions if you have other questions. I know Bonnie Flynn is here as well, but we're available for any questions.
Alan, I just have to interject for 1 second. I just realized Mayor Venezia is on. I just want to know if Mayor Venezia is here in his capacity as planning board member.
Ms. Mondell, Councilwoman Mondell is.
She's the representative? It's, okay,
Michael Palavecchio asked me to sign on in case anybody had any questions as well.
perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay, Mr. Paul, yes.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry to interrupt. I understand this is new territory for all of us. So that's why you see myself, the mayor, we just want to make sure we're available for questions.
We appreciate that very much. I have a quick question for you, Mr. Vecchio.
Yes, sir.
You said a buffer zone, between the schools and, I guess it would be churches or whatever. Would that be roughly about the same as a liquor store, maybe 200 feet?
200 feet, it can be, yes. We had talked anything from 200 to 500 feet.
Okay.
And I can say there was hesitation or concern about that because in some areas it did seem to knock out certain business districts, but it wasn't something we were all settled on whether to have it or not have it. But I think 200 feet makes sense.
And that would be somewhat reasonable, I would think, and actually, in all reality, in my opinion, it would be best if this went through and at least Bloomfield will take control of what's going in and out of here and where it's going to be. And again, these businesses would have to go back in front of the planning board, I believe. Is that correct, Mr. Parlavecchio?
All subject to site plan review, that's right.
Okay.
So there's always that layer of review that, let's say, other retailers will not have.
We always have a control of what's going on here. Before I poll the board though, Mayor, did you have anything to say or to add to Mr. Parlavecchio's presentation?
Just, what you mentioned, that initially we did not, put it in a buffer for the, schools, but we will be putting that in, to amend the ordinance.
That'd be great. Okay. Question, well, Mr. Stern?
Just to go back to what you had said about businesses not being able to cohabitate with these businesses, does that include, the board recently just adopted the ability for microbreweries to pop up, does that include microbreweries?
That is, if they're licensed for sale of alcoholic beverages, they can't co-locate.
Okay.
Anyone else? Mr. Barbula?
Yes, Mr. Parlavecchio, a few questions. So the resolution referring the ordinance to the planning board has language that says conditional use in all B2 CBD and CC, which is community commercial zones, but the proposed ordinance doesn't seem to make mention of the community commercial zones. So could you just clear that up?
You're right, that's an oversight. It's not in the ordinance. It should not be in that referral resolution.
And does the CBD, does that encompass the Bloomfield Center redevelopment area?
No, the answer to that's no. The CBD, the Bloomfield Center redevelopment areas are excluded. They're governed by redevelopment plans. They're not governed by the zoning ordinance. And in fact, the statute prohibits any property that's a beneficiary of a tax benefit from hosting any cannabis site or any cannabis business. So none of the redevelopment areas can be included, or these uses cannot be permitted in under any redevelopment plan.
So if it's, if a property is the beneficiary of a pilot, then they cannot host a cannabis business, is what you're saying?
That is correct.
And the proposed ordinance mentions that of the 6 permitted businesses, 3 of which need to be micro businesses. So could you just explain what a micro business is and how that's defined?
Yes, a micro business, as you can imagine, I want to make sure I get you a good definition. So I'm going to go to the source of the indulgence. So I'm doing what they call a little soft shoe while I find that. It's a smaller business. It's a lot of these cannabis businesses tend to be national and larger corporate type operations. So the inclusion of micro businesses in the statute was really to encourage small business owners and local business owners. So technically it is a person or entity is licensed. They have no more than 10 employees. They operate in a space of no more than 2,500 square feet in the area. And it depends on what you do, whether you could be a processor, wholesaler, distributor, etc. But it's essentially a small. And it's licensed specifically that way by the state. So we're trying to encourage not just the national corporate type businesses who are fine, and I'm sure they're fine, but also some small businesses.
Okay. And just one or two more questions here. So I see there's also language in the proposed ordinance where it says each cannabis retailer shall be on its own lot, upon which shall be no other uses, and shall also have its own parking. So that seems to suggest that the cannabis retailers will be permitted only essentially on standalone businesses on their own lots. For example, they couldn't be part of like a strip mall. Is that correctly?
You're right, and I'm going to lean on Michael Rubin and Bonnie a little bit. Some of our concern, and again, we're waiting for regulation, this prohibition about co-locating with grocery and food stores and liquor stores, the language is not really clear when it comes to things like strip malls. If you can be in something like that, if there's a deli next door, a bagel shop, or a liquor store, can they even be in that same premise? I don't think we're sold quite yet on how that works. So previously approved was a medical dispensary down on the south end of Bloomfield Avenue, and that's in a standalone location as a medical dispensary, not as a retail location yet. So we tried to use that as a model for other things, and so that was a consideration. We also have some considerations of neighboring towns opting out, and that, and more people being attracted to a Bloomfield. We wanted to make sure we had something that had parking, and going to cars, and not with that.
Abdul, if I may add to that, one of the concerns that was found in Massachusetts in some of these towns where they began to permit them as it was legalized was it was very popular. And they had lines running around the block with people who were trying to get in as customers. And one of the concerns that we all had was the effect that if that kind of response is received by these establishments, and they were, for example, on Broad Street in the north end among a strip of storefronts, what that might mean for their adjacent businesses. So as in a way to control that probability and see how this really works, the decision was made to make sure that they were on lots big enough to control that kind of response on the lot so that it wouldn't impact adjacent businesses. It may very well be that down the road we see that that's not really a problem, and the ordinance can then be amended to reflect that determination. I mean, one of the things that's required in the ordinance, if I recall correctly, let me just see, is that the site plan show an area for queuing of customers. So we want to make sure that there is room there, that this doesn't really negatively affect other businesses that might be adjacent to these sites. And that's why it's starting out this way.
Okay, so essentially we're taking a cautious approach, dipping our toe in the water, so to speak, just to see how it plays out, with the option for loosening the regulations, expanding the locations where these businesses are permitted as time goes on and we gain some experience with this and we see how it plays out.
I think that's a pretty fair assessment, Mr. Bureau. I think we're taking a conservative approach because, like I said, it's new territory and we want to see how it works. But we didn't want to opt out of everything because I don't think the mayor and council are afraid of this. I think it's just we want to do it in a controlled and sensible way.
Understandable. I mean, it's still somewhat uncharted territory. We don't know how it's going to play out. And I think your point as to neighboring towns that are prohibiting this across the board, including retail establishments, could create a demand, that drives that traffic into towns like ours. And, we don't want to set ourselves up for a scenario where we're kind of overwhelmed. I mean, we see where like some of these popular burger joints open up, you know, and you see other like retail establishments that have a strong following and, you know, and people are camped out overnight. So I think that's a, you know, a point well taken. Just one more question. So I've seen the language, there's also, ordinances, there's also language to the effect that variances cannot be granted to increase the number of permitted cannabis retailers. So for example, that's saying that an applicant cannot go to, if we already have, say, 2 cannabis retailers located in the first ward, an applicant cannot go to the zoning board to seek a use variance to get a 3rd cannabis retail establishment permitted in the first ward. That only be permitted by the council amending the ordinance. Is my understanding correct on that? That they not only can we not increase number 6 beyond the 6 permitted, but we can increase beyond the number in each sector of town?
That's good.
Okay.
You good, Mr. Fabiola?
Yeah, just one thing I want to clarify, Mr. Rubin. So,
Yes.
so the issue with the CBD and the pilots and all that. So does that only apply to properties that receive a pilot, or does that apply to the entire redevelopment zone? That prohibition?
Well, I suspect that everybody in a redevelopment zone got it by pilot, but it affects only those that have some kind of a tax abatement or exemption.
Okay, so
There may be some that come off, if they only had a short-term exemption, they may come off.
And any new project in a redevelopment area will have gotten some kind of a tax benefit.
okay. All right, thank you. That's all I have.
Any other questions, board? Mr. Stern, again?
Yeah, sorry, just a couple of follow-up questions to what was just said. First thing is just curious, can the amount of dispensaries that we've put forward, so the council has decided on 6, if someone does come up and they understand that there is you can't ask for a 7th, can that be challenged on the state level, or is it local, completely determines everything and there's no challenging this, ordinance?
The statute allows the municipality to limit the number of businesses that they permit within the municipality. So they would have to challenge the constitutionality of the statute, because we're acting pursuant to the authority granted by the enabling statute.
Understood. Now, just to play devil's advocate, I don't disagree with the logic behind people lining up and the need for parking. I totally agree with it. But looking at it from the other side, our town, and anyone correct me if I'm wrong, most of the businesses are in strict type of settings. Most businesses are not standalone locations. And again, anyone correct me if I'm wrong here, so it seems like there is an extreme limitation that is being placed on the operability of these businesses. Just thinking about south side of town, everything is pretty much in a strip setting. North side of town, for the most part, with maybe the exception of a couple of businesses. So I'm trying to understand here, if we're going to allow this to come into town with a maximum of 6, but they have restrictions on where they can be, in the sense that it has to be a standalone lot with parking, I feel like we're limiting it to like 2 or 3 places. I don't really know of many available real estate in town, commercially available, that meets this criteria.
Time will tell, Mr. Stern. I wouldn't underestimate the creativity of the people to spot and identify locations throughout town. I mean, IHOP, is that a location? Is that a place with its own parking on a standalone lot?
Mr. Stern, I guess we are gonna look at this on Monday night before we do final passage, and it possibly could be that we could allow it in the strip mall setting.
See, the problem with the strip mall setting is that the statute says that you cannot have this establishment in or upon a premises that serves food or alcohol. So any strip mall that you do will be in or upon. Now, the industry believes that means you can't be in the same store, so you can't be in a convenience store. But my view is if that was intended, we simply say in an establishment that sells food or alcohol. But it says in or upon a premises where food or alcohol is sold. So I don't believe that until we see the regulations that come out, I would strongly advise against permitting them in any kind of a strip center until we know really what that language was intended to be.
So
And
then
we
let
can
me
always do that, we could do that a month from now, once the regulations are out, which are coming out by the end of August, I understand. And we can amend it at any time, but I would be more cautious at this time.
So let me just, as an example, let's hypothetically say, okay, I'll give you an example. I don't know if it's necessarily the same lot, because there's a separation there. There's an empty lot next to Holston's that's just sitting there. Let's assume someone says, I'm gonna put a small little building on there, I'm gonna build a building, and, there's gonna be a driveway separation between me and Holston's, okay?
It's not a separate lot, it's on its own lot. As long as it's not, it's on its own lot, that's all that's necessary. You could take any gas station in town, abandoned or otherwise, and if you could clean it up and build a building, that'd be the perfect setting for this in terms of what this was intended to encourage, because we have like a lot of gas stations in parts of town that they aren't really permitted under the ordinance. That would be an ideal conversion to a permitted use. But I think that we need to see how this shakes out.
I agree with Mr. Rubin, I'm not.
There's a lot of newspaper articles in some of the towns in New Massachusetts about the impact on neighboring businesses that this was having at the time that it first opened in Massachusetts. It was a big problem.
Anyone else? Councilwoman Mondell.
I just kind of wanted to echo the mayor, though, that I think maybe we do need to consider where they can go, because I think it pushes businesses, this kind of business, only to a certain area of town. So I just want to make that point. But I did have a question. I mean, if we move forward and say, this is how we're going to do it right now, Mr. Rubin, you were saying that we can go back and change it?
At any time. At any time. Once you adopt it in time, and the statutory time period, you're now going to be free to make amendments and see how it works and decide that you want to go this direction instead of that direction, or whatever you want to do. And I think that in the conversations that we had between Bonnie and Mr. Parvecchia and Mr. Malucci and me, we all decided to go slow. That let's give the town a chance to absorb this and evaluate it before we begin to open it up to more venues.
Councilwoman Mondell, I think it's important to note, if I can, Mr. Chair, the converse of that is also true. If no ordinance is adopted within the timeframe, then we're stuck without an ordinance, and there is no control, there is nothing to amend either up or down. So that's the importance of getting that work done and getting us started, and we can do it.
I think, you can, if you talked about this geographic restriction, and I know that I've been asked to prepare a resolution tonight so that this can be considered by the council in a timely manner before August. And I think that one of the things the board should resolve, at least as a recommendation of the council, as to what that geographic distance should be, if they're so inclined to recommend that from school. The statute on liquor stores is 200 feet from churches and schools, both public and private.
I agree with Mr. Rubin on that. I think that I think from a personal and business perspective, that if we're gonna hold it to the same standard as alcohol, which it is, in my opinion, I think it needs to have the same limitations in that regard as well. I feel like a lot of people in town just kind of look at it and be like, so you're gonna limit the alcohol in 200 feet, but you wouldn't do the same for marijuana. And I think it's only fair that we treat it the same way if it's gonna be given as a legal substance to use.
That's a very good point, Mr. Stern. I think I agree with that 100% also. Mr. Barbulo, you had your hand up? Yes.
Well, I would suggest perhaps we consider a larger buffer zone, at least to start out with. You know, I agree with Mr. Stern in the sense that we should consider regulating these similar to liquor stores, but as Mr. Rubin has said, and Mr. Polavecchio has said, you know, some surrounding towns are prohibiting these businesses altogether. There's not going to be a lot of locations initially for folks to buy this stuff. So I think, you know, and one of the concerns I'm hearing from Mr. Rubin and Mr. Polavecchio is that initially there could be, you know, a rush on the places that do open up because there aren't going to be many around. So there could be this kind of crush of demand for it. And that could overwhelm, you know, the local area just from folks, from the foot traffic, you know, car traffic, folks, you know, queuing up to get into these places. So I would be inclined to be a little bit more cautious and perhaps have a larger buffer, maybe of 1,000 feet or, you know, whatever, you know, folks think is reasonable, just to start out with. And as Mr. Orban has said, you know, we can always adjust this over time based on what our actual practical experience is.
I want to ask Bonnie Flynn to comment on that. I know she's evaluated in some areas in town these radiuses, and so she might have some insight as to what that might mean.
Yeah, it really does wipe out a lot of the areas if you increase to 1,000. Almost all of it, like Mr. Stern was saying, you know, you're kind of allowing it, but you're not providing the stage for it. So I did try to do some mapping. I'm still working on it. We have a program that doesn't really lend itself to easy buffer mapping. So I will keep trying to do that. But yeah, I think 1,000 feet from really anywhere is a little too large.
Ms. Flynn, if you don't mind, 200 feet, same restriction that we have on liquor stores. Is that a more reasonable distance?
I think so, for sure.
Okay, and Mr. Rubin or Mr. Polavecchio, if I could just ask either one, if 200 feet, can that always be changed in the future? In other words, say we find out 200 feet it doesn't work for the town, we need a bigger buffer. Can that buffer be increased in the near future or in the future at all?
Yeah, but you couldn't go back and kick out the people that are within that buffer.
Maybe I'd start with 500 instead of 200, if you want a bigger one than 200.
Well, if we started with 500, could that be reduced then?
Yeah.
But I also think before the Cannabis Commission does have their regulation, you know, it's gonna be a bit of time. I mean, certainly, we're not gonna see the lines and that kind of stuff, but we can do a little more analysis without this deadline kind of looming over us, to show maybe it is gonna be better at 200 or 500.
Well, Mike, if we write the resolution for this evening, can we just say with a buffer zone of approximately 200 to 500 feet, and can that be filled in within when the mayor and council meet in August?
Yeah, I mean, we have to agree to the recommendation.
Yeah, is that something, Bonnie, that you would think would work? If we go 200 to 500 and leave it up to the discretion of the mayor and council? Or to yourself, your recommendation and Mr. Marici's recommendation?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you could certainly suggest to council and they could just approve as is and we can continue to do analysis. I think we are assuming we're gonna amend this in the future. So
just off the top of my head, if we say 200 to 500 foot buffer, and that could be filled in, whether it's 200, 300, 400, 350, whatever, as you and Anthony Marucci and the mayor and council work on this and Mr. Lassik's input, maybe you'll come up with a more definitive number that you think would work. be suitable for the town.
If I can
Yes.
respond,
Mr.
just
Marucci.
just to echo what Bonnie just mentioned, I, years ago, prepared the drug-free school zones within the township, and I can tell you, it practically covered the entire town, so the 1,000 feet, if you're gonna adopt this new ordinance, the 1,000 feet can never work. I think you really have to bring it down, and you're probably gonna be in that 200 range, in my opinion.
So, Anthony, if you don't mind me asking you then, 200 is a more reasonable distance for this to work at all.
Well, you have to remember also, I've been working with both Mr. Parlavecchio, Mr. Rubin, and Ms. Flynn on this for months now, and a lot of our concerns have been placed into this ordinance, and remember that the sales is limited to 21 years of age and older. So even if it is near a school, it's not like school children go, you know, the school children can't go into the premises. So there are a lot of controls on this.
Yeah, but to be fair, Mr. Marucci, I don't think it was necessarily just about the availability to these individuals to walk into the establishment. I think it was more about perception. And I think that while we consider this and we allow these businesses to begin to pop up in town, again, from an economic perspective, I completely agree with the amount of revenue that it will generate for the business owners of the town, for the state, but at the same time, we have to be cognizant of the residents who live in town and the perception that we are allowing this establishment to be near a school, which could theoretically indicate to them that we are not supporting or that we're allowing children to learn that it's okay to smoke marijuana. I think there's an outside perception that we have to be careful about because, you know, we have to represent the town's interests as well as the people who live here. And I think that's just as important. It's not about whether they walk in.
There's no argument with that. Again, my only point is that we spent a lot of time on this, and I believe that there are a lot of controls in here in terms of the limitations of the number of locations and the fact that there are conditional uses, there are a lot of conditions. Remember, 3 of them out of the 6 are micro businesses, as Mr. Parlavecchio explained. The maximum square footage is 2,500 square feet, so there's smaller places of business, and believe me, there are plenty of places in town that you can have these, and we can control it. The town can actually control it, you know.
So, Mr. Marucci, then, your feeling is the 200-foot buffer is sufficient?
I believe so.
Ms. Flynn, would you agree with that? Bonnie, can you hear me?
Yes,
Oh, would you
Yes.
agree that the 200-foot buffer is sufficient then?
yes.
It would be. Okay, Mr. Parlavecchio, how do you feel about that, sir?
I'm okay with it. I think equating it to liquor at this point, the liquor store at this point is fair.
Mayor, you on board with that?
And Mr. Collier, one other thing is, just a reminder, there can't be any outward, and I understand perception comments completely, of course I do. There can't be any outside advertisement of marijuana products or imagery on the stores. So, you know, if you think of these like a Grateful Dead shop or something that's not what's going to be permitted. It's
We're
not
not gonna have a fake cigarette or something lit outside or whatever, you know.
That's right.
Okay. Any other questions, board?
Yeah,
Wait, Mr. Stern, wait a minute. Is there anyone else besides Mr. Stern? Okay, Mr. Stern.
Just a quick question about the taxing on this. You said that there was going to be 2% tax on the receipts of each individual sale or the sales for the day?
Individual sale.
It's the individual, it's each retail sale. So
I'm just curious.
Tax to the town.
I'm curious where the number 2% came from.
Statute.
That's the state statute.
State
That's
statute.
the maximum.
That's the maximum you can impose?
Correct.
State, yeah.
The statute permits a maximum of 2% on retail sales and 1% on other types of sales.
I'm just curious, does anyone know the sales tax on cigarettes?
It's substantial.
That's a lot, right?
18.5, 27%, something.
20,
18.5 plus sales tax.
Wow.
Interesting.
That's why I was smoking 35 years ago.
Something to think about as the commission re-looks at these things, the fact that they're paying 25% tax on cigarettes, but 2% on marijuana, when this is $1 billion industry.
Well, that's a good question. I don't know that there's not additional taxes that the retailers have to collect, but this is a specific new tax that just goes to the municipality. So it's
there's
not,
nothing,
yeah,
as
I don't
opposed
know.
to, as opposed to a cigarette tax where you don't benefit from the sale of cigarettes in your town. Here, you're gonna benefit from the sale of cannabis products in your town through a special 2% surcharge.
I don't know that there's not, I don't know that there's not, some type of, sales tax plus other tax. that is,
I just want to clarify that the whole taxing scheme will not be part of the land development ordinance and will not be within the jurisdiction of the board. So, for example, if a new entity comes in and they go through site plan, a condition of approval will be compliance with the tax obligations, but it is not a land use issue.
It's placed in the ordinance for completeness, so if some prospective business wants to know what Bloomfield, how Bloomfield treats these businesses, it's all in one place.
And once it's codified, it'll be in its own chapter as a tax, as a taxing, right.
My lawyer wanted.
So, if I may, one last question.
Yeah, Mr. Spencer.
What if, let's say, I'm one of the micro sellers, I own the business, let's say 10 years down the line, you know what, I'm done, my business is worth $500,000, I'm gonna sell it. And then they decide that they wanna sell it to, I don't know, a larger dispensary or to somebody else. How does this process work in the sense of, once someone owns the license, the business is the license owner, or the individual is the license owner?
The restrictions on who it can be sold to and the amount of licenses that any one entity or person can hold. And in fact, I don't believe that, I'm not gonna go back into this, but my recollection is that no one who holds a, for lack of a better term, macro license can own a micro business.
So, but I could theoretically, as an individual, have the dispensary and sell my own business to another one person, not macro, but another person who's willing to take ownership of it and make.
Absolutely. But they would have to be licensed.
It would have to be licensed by the state.
Got it. Okay.
Any other questions, board? Mr. Mamula?
Just to follow up to this discussion about the expected demand, I'm just curious, does anyone know what the situation is with regard to surrounding municipalities in terms of which ones are prohibiting any retail cannabis establishments and which ones are approving it? I believe Nutley is prohibiting anything. I believe Montclair is allowing some. Any sense for what the lay of the land is with that?
I don't know, yeah, what I can tell you is any ordinances that were adopted prior to February were invalidated, so if a town last year said, when in anticipation of the legalization, if they decided to prohibit, those were invalidated. But other than Nutley, I don't know.
And Clifton has prohibited as well.
Montclair does allow it though, correct?
Montclair has one on Bloomfield Avenue, I think it is called a SEM.
That's an existing dispensary, that's,
The medical dispensary.
Okay. Any other questions? I see nobody. Mr. Marucci, would you just give a final comment on this as a zoning officer?
As the board knows, I serve as the zoning officer, so I was very involved in the discussions because of my concerns, and that's why I mentioned the fact that I believe that the ordinance that, and I'll compliment Mr. Rubin on it, that basically put it together, there are sufficient controls, especially with the fact that it has to go before the planning board as a conditional use when an application comes in. So I'm comfortable with the ordinance as it's written right now. And again, with if the council decides that they want to have a 200-foot radius limitation around schools, that's fine also.
Thank you, Mr. Marucci. Mr. Lasek, did you have any comments?
Well, I think the ordinance is thorough and covers a lot, and I would also agree with the 200 feet, considering it should be treated just as liquor is treated. We're talking about kind of the same thing, although it's technically not the same, the idea is the same, so to me, 200 foot is an appropriate distance, because as you said, as you start moving out, you're gonna start, taking properties out of it, and then you get kind of into an area where you're limiting, the intent.
Thank you, Mr. Lasek. Ms. Flynn, anything else to say?
I'll just echo what everyone said, that the ordinance is very thorough and great teamwork from everybody. And, we anticipate possible changes, so we'll just roll with the flow.
Thank you, Bonnie.
As things evolve.
Mayor, any comments?
No, just thank you, everyone, and appreciate your time tonight.
Mr. Polavecchia, any final words?
No, Mr. Chairman, thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time, sir. All right, at this time, can I have a motion that we recommend, no, like, how do we do? We just make a recommendation to send it back to the mayor and council.
Make a recommendation that they adopt the ordinance, and if you want to include within that recommendation, a geographic restriction, you should do so.
Okay, I will make that motion that we do send it. Mr. Stern, did you have a question before that?
Yeah, I'm just curious, is this not a public discussion where there's a
No, it's
public
not.
portion?
There's no public portion to this.
Yeah, the public hearing is the second reading before the council, as any ordinance would be. That's a public hearing at that time.
Got it.
Okay? Is there any other comments, board? If not, I will make the motion that we send this back up to the mayor and council with the addition of the 200-foot buffer to be included with it. Do I have a second?
Second that.
Mr. Zitka, Nick Paul, everybody.
Okay. Mr. LaFour,
Yes.
Mr. Zitka,
Yes.
Mr. Harvey,
Yes.
Mr. Babula,
Yes.
Councilwoman Mondell,
Yes.
Mr. Lasek,
Yes.
Councilman Rockwell,
Yes.
Ms. Richardson,
Yes.
Chairman LaQuaglia.
Yes, I'm so moved, and we will take care of that now. Mike, how do you want to handle the resolution?
And I have 5 minutes I have a rough draft. I can now finish it, and I'd like to circulate it by email to everyone. You can
Okay.
take a look at it, and we can adopt it tonight. I need about 5 minutes to do that.
We'll take a 5-minute recess then. Nick, did you have something to say?
I'm gonna just have to run over to the office to get it, if you're gonna email it to us.
I'm gonna email it to everybody.
Okay, well, I wanna go grab it real quick, so I
Same way
have
I
it.
do all the other resolutions.
Okay,
Okay?
All right, so we'll take a 5-minute recess. Thank you, Mr. Polavecchio. Excellent presentation. Ms. Flynn and Mayor, thank you for coming in and giving us your opinion on that. If you want to hang around, you're more than welcome.
all right, 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay, planning board now is back in session. And Nick, would you read the resolution?
Sure.
Has everyone seen the resolution? Are there any questions? I
No.
see no hands. Read it in, please, Nick.
Sure. Resolution in the matter of the review of a proposed ordinance permitting cannabis retail establishments as a conditional use in the Central Business District and the B2 Neighborhood Business District. Now, everybody who voted on it can also move this resolution and vote.
Okay. Any questions before we take a vote? None. I'll make the motion that we approve this resolution. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Zitka. Nick?
Okay? Mr. Babula?
Yes.
Mr. Harvey?
Yes.
Mr. LaFour?
Yes.
Mr. Lasek?
Yes.
Councilwoman Mondell?
Yes.
Ms. Richardson?
Ms. Richardson, you're muted. Ms. Richardson?
We can move on without her.
Okay.
Mr. Zitka
Yes.
and Chairman LaQuaglia.
Yes.
Okay.
Try Ms. Richardson. Ms. Richardson?
You missed me, Nicole.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilman Rockwell. Oh, I
Yes.
apologize, I did. Councilman Rockwell.
Yes.
Okay.
Ms. Richardson? Mike, can I complete this without her vote?
Mike,
Assuming that yes.
yeah, I believe, yeah, you're on mute, Mike. You're on mute.
Unmute, Mike.
It can be a vote with one less person.
Right.
Okay. So it's unanimous then?
Correct.
Okay, resolution approved then.
Okay.
Thanks for your help with that, Mr. Rubin.
Hey, Mike,
Okay.
just as a,
I know, I saw, I'll correct that.
okay, thank you.
You got it.
Okay. Be in tomorrow for that, Nick.
All right, please.
Okay, next order of business. Is Ms. Richardson back yet? I'd like to read this in anyways. Application of 110-116 Washington Street, Urban Renewal LLC, as applicant and owner for bulk variances, preliminary and final major site plan approval, and any such other relief as may be required from the zoning ordinance of the Township of Bloomfield to construct a multifamily residential project in the Bloomfield Station redevelopment plan zone on premises known as map 10, block 220, lot 25, better known as 110-116 Washington Street.
Just as a clarification, Ms. Richardson, you're on now?
Ms. Richardson?
I asked her to unmute, she unmuted. Maybe she's having an issue with her audio?
Or video.
Yeah. You know what, Nick, just make sure she's okay though.
Okay.
All right. And we have a memo from Mr. Marucci regarding this. Chairman, members of the board, regarding 110-116 Washington Street, map 10, block 220, lot 26, 110-116 Washington Street, Urban Renewal LLC, owner applicant, zone BSRD, Bloomfield Station redevelopment plan. Dear Chairman, members of the board, the subject property was approved by the planning board for the construction of 170 residential dwelling units together with accessory parking and is currently under construction. The application presently before the planning board seeks amended preliminary and final site plan approval with both variances. My office has reviewed the following documentation in support of the application. 1, standard development application. 2, site plans prepared by Casey and Keller Incorporated, originally dated February 03, 2007, with a total of 19 revisions, the last revision dated April 19, 2021. In comparing the revised plans with the approved site plans, it appears that the building is proposed to be set back slightly closer to Washington Street than previously approved. The approved front yard setback on Washington Street was 10 feet with a setback of 9 feet at the stairwell. The revised front yard setback to Washington Street is 8.22 feet and 7.27 feet at the stairwell. The front yard setback is therefore 1.78 feet shorter at the building and 1.73 feet shorter at the stairwell. I find no other variations between the approved plans and the amended plans. The applicant's professionals shall provide testimony in support of the proposed setback changes. My office has no further engineering comments. However, I do reserve the opportunity for further comments and/or recommendations pending testimony provided during the hearing. Respectfully submitted by Anthony Marucci, DELSPP Planning Board Engineer. Thank you, Mr. Roach. Mr. Tremulak.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Alan Tremulak from the Montclair Law Firm of Asher, Felter, Tremulak, McDonough, Golia, and Trevenant. We represent the applicant 110-116 Washington Street Urban Renewal LLC. This, as I think it should be clear from now, is an application for an amendment to the approved site plan for this property, which is located in the Bloomfield Station redevelopment plan. The original approval of the site plan as well as variances was granted by this board in 2007, permitting construction of a residential project consisting of 2 5-story buildings and a total of 170 dwelling units. There have been, I think, at least 2, perhaps more, amendments to the site plan prior to the application this evening. As you probably know, this building is now under construction, or the buildings are now under construction. And we're here before the board this evening because an engineering issue was discovered while the foundation walls were partially constructed. And as a result of that, we need a minor revision to the approved site plan, which would result in the building being located slightly closer to Washington Street than was originally approved, actually about 1 foot 8 inches closer to the street in one area, which will be discussed this evening. And that also results in an additional, one additional setback variance, and those are the only revisions to the approved site plan. And I have one witness to present this evening to discuss the revised plan as well as the variance, and that would be the project engineer, Michael Lanzafama. So unless the board has any preliminary questions for me, I would like to call Mr. Lanzafama.
I think that will be fine. Thank you, Mr.
Mr. Lanzafama, raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Just
My
state
name
it.
is Michael
Perfect.
Lanzafama. I'm an engineer with the firm of Casey and Keller Incorporated, 258 Main Street, Millburn, New Jersey. I'm principal with the firm. I'm licensed as a professional engineer, land surveyor and planner in the state of New Jersey. And I've been the project engineer, as Mr. Trembulak pointed out, since 2007, when we got our initial approval. The application before you is, as Mr. Trembulak pointed out, is due to an engineering issue that arose during the construction of the building. There's no change to the size of the building, the number of units, the number of parking spaces, impervious coverage. Everything will remain exactly the same. Because of certain site conditions, it was necessary to construct this building on a piling style sub-foundation to support the foundation of the building. And to do that, we had to install 695 cylinders that get filled with stone that provide for a foundation for the foundation. My field crews, my survey crews, staked out the location of each and every one of those piles. It turns out that we made an error in the location of those piles. Relative to each other, they're perfectly set. However, relative to the property lines, we mislocated the entirety of that 695 piles and shifted it, as Alan pointed out, approximately 20 inches closer to Washington Street. What that does is it affects the front yard setback that was approved under the original application and the subsequent revisions. The original application granted a variance for a 10-foot setback to the main core of the building and a 9-foot setback to the stair tower. If I'd like to share my screen to give you a sense of exactly what it is we're talking about in as far as the location. What you're looking at is the site plan drawing, sheet number 3, dated 4/19/21, and the area in question.
Mr. Lanzafama, can we mark this as A1, please?
Certainly, Mr. Rubin. A1 is the site plan drawing, sheet 3, in the set of plans that were submitted to the planning board.
Thank you.
And the area in question is that the building itself, as you can see by this dotted line, represents the actual building footprint itself. So when we shifted the building, this stair tower
and utility room gets shifted closer to Washington Street by approximately 20 inches. The line of sight from the driveway, as you can see, is totally unaffected by that setback differential. You're not affecting light, air, and open space, which is usually the requirement of a setback because it's open to the street. And the area of the building that's solid is basically just this grayed out area here. The remainder of this area, which is partially under the building, is really just a screen wall. And then you have the exposed parking areas as you move further to the west. There is no substantial impact to any adjoining property owners. There's no impact on the amount of landscaping that will be installed in that area. We will still be installing the same amount of landscaping that was approved on the original plan. To give you a sense of a comparison, we prepared an exhibit which we will call A2. And what this exhibit shows you in red, it shows you the location of the building as it was approved, and in green, the location where we ended up staking it out to. As I said, the difference in location is really de minimis. I don't see any substantial detriment to the public good or the intent and purpose of your zoning ordinance in granting this variance modification. In my mind, it could be granted under the C2 criteria of the municipal land use law, having the fact that it does not have any significant impact on adjoining properties or the intent and purpose of the zone plan. One thing to consider as well, the actual traveled way of Washington Street is an additional 12 plus feet from the property line. So in essence, the massing of the building, the solid or heavy portion of the building, is actually over 20 feet away from the actual traveled way of Washington Street. So I don't see that, in my mind, helps justify the ask for the variance. So that's our case basically in a summary form. If you have any specific questions on what this implies or what the implications might be, I'd be happy to answer those questions.
Mr. Tremula, can you just make sure I get a copy of A2 at your earliest convenience? Thank you.
Yes, absolutely, Nicole.
Can we go back to the screen where I see everybody?
Sure.
Okay, before I open it up to the board for questions, Mr. Marucci, it seems like in your memo, you're okay with this?
Mr. Chairman and board members, I understand what happened here, and when Mr. Lanzafama explains that they poured 600 plus pilings, it's impossible to move those. And you know, as an engineer myself, as a surveyor myself, I've staked out many a foundation, so I understand that we do so much math that it's very easy to make an error, and you can't move 600 plus pilings. So it is what it is in terms of the location of the building. The important part here, though, is that it does not affect the sight line to the railroad trestle. But also, I think Mr. Lanzafama explained that Washington Street has a wider right-of-way than our normal municipal roadways. Our normal roadways are 50 foot in width with 10 feet on each side for the sidewalk areas. In this case, it's a 60-foot right-of-way. So as Mr. Lanzafama explained, it's on this sheet number 3. The area between the curb and the right-of-way line is 12.8 feet. When you add that with the 7.2, you have 20 feet there. So you in essence have 20 feet from the curb to the building, which is what you would normally have anyway if this was a 50-foot right-of-way. So with those conditions, I think this is it's fine. It's it's satisfactory to me.
Thank you, Mr. Marucci. Board, are there any questions for Mr. Lonzafama? I don't see anybody raising their hand.
No.
Okay, are there any questions for Mr. Marucci? Again, I see no hands. Okay, that portion is closed. Is there anyone from the public online waiting to get into this, Nick?
There's somebody on, but I don't believe that's part of.
Now's the time to ask.
No, there's nobody raising their hand.
Nobody?
Nope.
Okay, in that case, that portion is closed also. Mr. Tremulak, any closing statement?
No, nothing to add, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lonzafama said everything that needs to be said, and I would request that the board approve the amended plan as submitted.
Any comments, board? I would just like to say, as long as Mr. Marucci is okay with this, the scope and size of this property, I mean, a foot, I think we can live with that, a foot and 7 inches. These things happen in something this large, and again, 600 plus pilings, I don't think we could force them to tear that up by no means, so that's my opinion on this. Any comments from the public? Nick, again, nobody's on.
No.
Can't see anything. That portion is closed. Can I have a motion to approve or deny this application?
Make the motion to approve it.
Mr. LaFord?
Got it.
Second?
Make that mistake.
Who seconded the motion? I'm sorry.
Who seconded?
I'll second.
Oh.
Mr. Zeka. Okay, Nick?
Before I poll everyone, is Ms. Richardson on?
Yes, I am.
Okay,
Oh,
perfect.
okay, you're okay then, okay.
All right.
Good.
All right, so I'm gonna do roll. Mr. LaFort?
Yes.
Mr. Zitka?
Yes.
Mr. Harvey?
Yes.
Mr. Babula?
Yes.
Councilwoman Mundell?
Yes.
Mr. Lassick?
Yes.
Councilman Rockwell?
Yes.
Ms. Richardson?
Yes.
Chairman LaQuaglia?
Yes, application approved. Thank you, Mr. Tremulak and Mr. Lonzafama.
Thank you very much, board members. Thank you.
You're more than welcome, gentlemen. Okay, board, one other quick thing before we adjourn. It was brought up at the last meeting, I believe, when we're gonna meet in person again. I'd like to throw this out to the board. The zoning board already said that they were gonna start meeting in person in October. Thinking about it, I thought that might be a good time for us. If, God forbid, this pandemic starts up again, schools are gonna be back in session in September. That should be a good guide, some sort of barometer as whether or not the pandemic is over. If everything is fine, I was gonna put it to the board, and we'll do this, I don't know, if October, which I don't know what the date is. When the October meeting, I believe it's October 5th, we will go back in person and do it. Does anybody object to that? I see no one.
Thank God.
All right, relax, huh?
I'm so tired of this screen, this nonsense.
Yeah, it's okay when you turn it off and take a nap, but we don't know.
I don't ever turn it off and take a nap.
Okay, next meeting is August the 10th. We have one project, and I believe we adjourned the Broad Street project to that. Mr. Rubin, have you spoken to the attorney for, was it 106 Broad?
102 Broad.
102 Broad Street.
102 Broad Street.
No, I have not.
As far as I know, they're still working on it, and they realize that they're on for August, so if they're gonna adjourn, she's gonna have to send me something in writing. But I'll get that done before the meeting.
She'll do it, she'll just be notified
Yeah.
when that she's on.
I'll
And
keep-
If they do want to adjourn it to November, we could do it from August to November, correct, Mr. Rubin?
Or we could do it a month at a time.
I don't understand, I gotta find out from her what the justification is at this point, this has been dragging out a long time, let's move it, there's an objector,
With an attorney.
Yeah, we gotta just get this going, and so let me find out what's going on with this.
We'll discuss it in August then.
All right, hopefully she'll be ready.
Hopefully they'll be ready in August and we could wrap it up one way or the other.
Yep.
Anything else, Nick?
No, I have nothing.
Any other comments, board? Can I have a motion to adjourn?
We'll move.
Don't move. Everyone enjoy the rest of your summer, and we'll see you guys in August.
Bye, guys.
All right, bye, guys.